Hello, my name is Doug Leasure, and welcome to another video in the series providing training for Active Planner. Okay, previously we looked at the basics of Active Planner, creating plans and plan sheets, and creating a plan sheet for budgeting for a department expense. And now we're going to take the concept a little bit further and dive into some of the details of groups and columns. So let's start by just simply taking one of the plan sheets we created previously, and we're going to make a copy of that. So if we open the plan sheet, go to the main tab, we'll just generically call this training. We'll just use this to play around with the concepts that we're covering today, and then we can delete it when we're done. Okay, and insert or save the sheet and insert a new record, and now we have our new plan sheet. Okay, previously we looked at creating using the column creation wizard to create our groups and our columns. Today we're going to dig into that a little bit further. So let's start with a review of the column groups. I'm going to use a smart icon here for column group manager. And here we can see the 6 groups that were created using the wizard. So the first thing we need to talk about is the concept of the dates. Every group that we create has a group date. Now I need to take you back to the creation of a plan. When we create a plan, one of the things we set there is a plan date. And the date that we set when we created our plan initially was January 1st, 2011, because we were doing our budgeting for fiscal year 2011. And so January 2011 represents the first period in our plan year for which we're doing the budgeting. And so when we create our groups, we want our groups to be connected to or relative to the plan date. And we'll use this terminology relative when we're talking about groups as well as columns. The concept is simply this: when I create my plan for doing our budgeting for fiscal year 2011, I want the plan to be connected to the fiscal year 2011. I want my groups and my columns to be connected to this same date, relative to the same date. Because when I get around to taking my entire plan and moving it forward for next fiscal year, I would like everything that I create in my plan sheet to automatically move forward by one fiscal year. We accomplish that in Active Planner very easily by making everything relative to the overall plan. Let's take a look at the details of one of the groups, and you'll see how that starts to work, how that works. So when we created the actual group, we created a key and a description. We gave it a key actual because this group of columns will represent our balances for the current year actual. On the group date, we made it relative, with a year offset of 0 and a period offset of 0. So again, if our plan is January of 2011, then having an offset of 0 periods means it's still January. Having an offset of 0 years means it's still fiscal year 2011. And then the other thing we set up is our balance type. Since this column is going to be used for actuals, we set the balance type to actual. In a similar way, the budget group, so these would be the columns that represent our budget values. We created a group key of budget, description of current year budget, and the group date was set to relative, again year and period offset of 0. The balance type was set to a balance type of budget. Anytime we use a balance type of budget, we are required to provide a balance code. So we can have multiple balance codes for each type of budget we're creating. Perhaps original budget might be a balance code. forecast 1, forecast 2, forecast 3 might be different balance code that you use, so that we can actually keep track of the multiple versions of the budget that we've created. Now, when we created our overall plan, we did set at that point, at that high level, if you will, a default balance code for our budget. And the check mark here just simply allows us to use whatever that balance code is. Therefore, we have one place where we can maintain the balance code for all of our budget groups. Let's take a look at the prior year actual, and maybe it'll make a little bit more sense when we look at this, how the concept of the relative date works. So here our group key is prior actual, description is prior year actuals, the group date is relative, and the year offset is -1. Again, our plan date was set to January of 2011, so a year offset of -1 means that our group is January of 2010. And a quick review of the group manager, we can see the group dates listed here. January 2011 for our actual and budget, current year actual and budget. Our prior actual is set to January of 2010. Our balance type is actual, budget, actual. And then we do a similar thing then for our year-to-date totals for actual, current year budget, and prior year actual. Okay, so the concept of the group is that inside of Active Planner, we're going to have multiple columns. The columns are grouped together according to their functionality. So as we put columns inside of the groups, okay, it's based on their functionality, not their position on the sheet. So one of the functionalities we use the groups for is when we look at the calculations. So let me go ahead and go back to Review Manager for a quick second and expose the calculation button. So when we are creating these calculations, these sheet calculations, that's the way we bring external data into the plan sheet, what we have listed here on the left are the groups. Okay, so if I want to get the net change balances for our prior year actual, I just simply say that the function we're doing is net change. The source is our general ledger data for our group called prior year actual. And so the methodology is I can apply this one method of bringing in the external data. It's applied to all columns, whether there's 1 or 12 or more columns in the group. The same functionality is applied to all of those columns. So very easily I can have Active Planner retrieve the balances for all 12 columns, each of the periods in our fiscal year. The second thing we use the group for is when we want to hide or unhide the columns. And so if we look at the sheet view options, okay, down here in the bottom portion, user columns. So the idea here is that the columns, the note, flow note, calc buttons, and everything to its left are called reserved columns, meaning simply you as the plan sheet creator, you don't have control over the name or the order of these columns. You can decide whether or not you want them to be visible, but you cannot change their name or their order. The user columns, however, these are the columns that you define and create, and you are free to change their order as well as determining whether or not they're visible. And so what we see inside of Active Planner is that when I am hiding or unhiding the columns, I'm doing it based on the group. I can hide all 12 columns of actual or make them all visible. But I'm doing it by group, not by individual column. So that will be important when later on we create a column. You can see that all columns do not have to be part of a group. So columns can be standalone, that is, they're not defined as part of a group. However, I cannot use the view option to hide columns if they are not part of a group. Okay, the next thing we need to look at would be the columns themselves. And so we'll use the column manager. And here we can see a list of the columns. And the list is according to their order on the sheet. The very first item would be the first column, first user-defined column. Then as we look down here, the order then talked about in here represents the order left to right in the plan sheet. And we have the ability to move our columns. So if I select a column and move it, looking back here, we can actually see that the column is immediately moving on the screen here. In a similar way, I can do the same kind of a function by selecting the column and then using one of the smart icons to move the column to the left or to the right. Now, just as you would expect, as you would find it in Excel, as you move the column, you will need to be careful and conscious of what that is doing to any of your cell formulas that are utilizing that column or the range of columns. So let's move this back to where it was initially, and we'll move on from there. Okay. The next thing you need to understand about the columns is that when we create them, we need to define whether they represent 1 period, 2 periods, 3 periods for quarterly information, or perhaps 12 periods where the single column would represent an annual amount. And so when we create a column, we give it a column key and a description, and then we define what column group this column will be part of. And we can use the simple drop down to select that. If it's not going to be part of any group, then we can select a group of none. Okay. In our case, we know that these columns are part of the prior actual, so we'll make them part of that group. Okay. The next thing is to create a valuation, and most of the time when you're creating a column, it will be a simple net change. Occasionally, rarely, but occasionally we need to define a column as a beginning balance or ending balance, but most of the time it'll be the net change. And then the next thing is to define the period information. Again, a column is always one or more, represents one or more periods. And so we do that by saying what the from and the through period will be. When we define our columns, we want to make them relative to the group, which is relative to the overall plan. So again, thinking our way as we've defined everything so far, the plan is January 2011. The group, the prior actual group, we've made that relative -1. So this group actually represents January 2010. That's what the group represents. The period, our first period, is going to be January 2010 plus 0 additional periods, meaning this is still January of 2010. Looking at our second period, it is relative period 1 through period 1. So it's January 2010 plus one more period, making it February of 2010. And we just do the same thing for each of our columns. So the 12th column is January plus an additional 11 periods, making it December of 2010. And if we look at the year-to-date or the annual column, it was defined as part of the group year-to-date prior total group, and its from through period was from 0 through 11. So from January through January plus 11 columns, which means December, represents December. And so that's how we would set up the periods. A quick look at the column manager list, and it's very easy for us to see how these columns are defined. It's also a great place to go back and make sure that we have defined the periods correctly. So January, February, March, April, May, June, down through December. So we can see quickly and easily that each of the columns were defined correctly. All right, let's take a look at creating a column and a column group. Let's go through the steps. And so for our example, what we want to do is we want to create a set of 12 columns that would represent prior actuals. We already have actuals for 2010, so let's make this group the prior actuals for 2009. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is think about where I want these things to reside positionally. We have a prior actual for 2011 here. So why don't we begin these 12 columns prior to the 2011 actual? So we will insert a new column here, and we will give it a column key. So let's say it's prior to actual period 1. Again, we're just creating a column key. All of our column keys must be unique. So we're creating a unique column key. And the description, we'll make it prior year 2 actuals. And do we want this to be called part of a group? Yes, we have the opportunity to hide the whole thing if we don't want to see those prior year actuals. And secondarily, because we're making them prior actuals, we will want eventually to define a calculation to bring in the balances for this group of columns. And so we must make them part of a group in order to bring in the external balance data. And so what we can do is we can click on the button here to actually create a new column group. And we'll go ahead and just borrow the same naming convention as we're using for our column keys. And we'll just make it PY2 ACT. That'll be the name of our column group, and this will be our prior Y2 actuals. Okay, and as we've said before, we're going to make it relative. And the year offset is, again, from the overall plan of fiscal year 2011. We will subtract 2 years from that, so that this will represent 2009. And a balance type is actual, and there we've created the group. And then for the from and through periods, we said we want to make these relative, 0 for the first one, and then relative 1, 2, 3, etc. for the remaining 11 columns. Well, let's get the first one set up and defined correctly, and then we'll just copy it multiple times. So the next thing we need to think about will be the column title. By default, I'm going to click OK to put it in there. So by default, a new column will have just simply a date and then the column key, or column number, the alpha character there. So let me go back and maintain this column, and let's think about the column title. What we've done in the past is to use the column key, and we could choose to do the same thing, but let's be a little bit more creative so I can show you some of the power and flexibility of the column title and these variables over here that we can apply to the column title. So rather than just using the column key, let's think about it in terms of maybe we want to make the column title say fiscal year 10, since this will actually represent the fiscal year 2010, fiscal year 2010 actuals. So what we can do is we can insert a new row here, and we can say FY, and then let's use the year of our period. Now, each of our periods that we're going to create have a beginning date and an ending date because they're associated with our periods. Every period has a beginning and ending date. And so the period end date, if we are thinking about the year, we can say period end date and use YY to represent just two characters of the year. And so this will give us fiscal year 10. And then let's do a space and ACT for actuals, underscore, and what I want to happen here then would be underscore 1 for the first period, underscore 2 for the second period, 3 for the third period, etc. And so what we can do is we can actually use our period number, and that way, as we copy this from one period to the next, the column title will adjust automatically. I don't have to manually change it to 1, 2, 3, etc. And then for our period end, let's change the date where we are just doing the month, day, year date format. And instead, let's be a little bit more creative here, and let's use a format that would give us the month abbreviation, Jan, Feb, Mar, etc., and the year. And so if we take a look at what that creates, it creates a column title that looks like FY09, ACT actual underscore, and then 1, 2, 3, etc. And then we'll have the date displayed as January 2009, February 2009, etc. Okay, so now that we have created the first column and defined the group and the column title correctly, now we just simply need to copy this 11 more times. And so what the methodology we use to do that is just simply to select our column group, our column that we're going to use as a starting point. And the idea is we're going to use the same column key over and over again, and we'll just simply change the period from 1 to 2 to 3, etc. So I'm just going to copy this part of the column key, put it in my paste buffer, and I'm going to use the copy function to say we want to copy this column, and we want to give it this column key prior your actual underscore 2, and it's going to insert it after the column that we're copying. Now we could positionally place it anywhere else we want to during the copy phase, but in our case we just want it to simply be the next column in order. Okay, and so it has made a copy of that column, but has not changed the from and through period. So the next thing we would want to do is go ahead and change the from and through period so that it represents our second period. Okay, and looking at what we've created back here in the background, we can see that we've now created fiscal year 9, actual 1 and 2, designated with the title January 29, February 29, etc. So now at this point, it's just a matter of doing this 10 more times for our remaining columns. And let me go ahead and give you a little tip here, a trick that I use, or the thing that I find to be most helpful in creating these. And that is, I can select the one we're going to use here, and we can do the copy command. I'm going to do a Control V to paste in the column key, add the period, this will be 3, and I'm hitting the Enter key. And now I can see that my copy button is selected or highlighted, which means if I hit the Enter key again, it's going to do another copy. Control V, tell it that indicate that it's period 4. Hitting the OK, hitting the Enter key will actually select the OK button, creating the column. And again, my column is still highlighted or selected, so hitting the Enter key again does yet another copy. And so now I can do period 5, Enter, Enter, Control V, period 6, and I can just quickly walk my way down to creating the columns that I need. Oops. And I've quickly created the 12 columns. And now we just need to go back and adjust the dates. And so what I want to do is maintain the column and just simply switch this to column 2, or to period offset 2. Enter will hit the OK button, is like hitting the OK button to save that. And then I'll just use my down arrow to select the next period. And we can just kind of march down through here and adjust the from and through periods very quickly. And so let's go ahead and just walk our way through here very quickly and finish this up. And you can see by using the keyboard, we can very quickly and easily, you're free to use the mouse to make these changes. I have just found it to be much more efficient and faster to use the keyboard and find that the keystroke methodology is actually the quickest way to accomplish this. And finally, for period 12, we'll fix up the from and through periods there. Okay, and now we have created our periods for our new group, and inserted them into the right position here. So the next thing we want to think about, obviously you would go ahead and assign the calculation to this new group. So if we look at the calculation, we now have a new group showing up here for prior year actual 2, and we could easily set the net change here such that this would create, or would bring in the historical values then for our new group. So if we just go ahead and refresh the calculations here, there are the actual balances then for our 12 periods in fiscal year 2009. So just that easy to create the new groups and columns. So let's take a look at, while we're thinking about columns and groups and maintaining them, let's take a quick look at the idea of deleting the columns and deleting groups. So if we come to our column manager one more time, we can see that we have our columns listed here, and I can select a column and delete it. Do we want to really do this? Yes, we do. I can select one or more columns and delete them in bulk, if you will. Okay. But I also wanted to show you that from the perspective of the group manager, if I choose the group and delete the group, it deletes not only the group but all columns inside of the group. So that's actually the quickest way to get rid of the entire group and the columns inside of the group. But I just wanted to show you both methods so you can see that we can easily add, copy, delete columns, and when deleting the group, it deletes all the columns inside of the group. Okay, so one of the other things we need to talk about here conceptually is the idea that these columns that we're creating inside of Active Planner, the intent is that these represent balances for historical actuals. They represent our budgets for our current or future year budgets. But in all cases, they represent values, not dates, not text, but values. And so that's one thing that people coming from the Excel world aren't familiar with is that I cannot just simply come here and format this as a type text or a type date and type text or dates in here, but these are just numeric values. But we also know that occasionally in the budgeting process, we do need dates. We do need textual type things. So Active Planner has provided a way to accomplish that using what's called custom columns. And so if I go to the custom column manager using the icon here, the smart icon, I can insert or append custom columns. So let's go ahead and append one. And a custom column, much like our other columns, requires a key and a description. And so let's presume that what we're doing here is we want to insert a column where we would enter dates. And so we'll give it a key and a description. And for the type, we're going to choose date. Now you can see our three choices are date, numeric, or text. We're going to choose date. And for the column key, let's go ahead and just use whatever we typed in for the description. And that creates our custom column. Now the other thing you need to understand is that the custom columns are going to always be the column are always going to show up just to the left of any of my user-defined columns. So they're always going to be the first columns in the order. So we have our reserved columns, our custom columns, and then the user-defined columns. But once we've created our custom columns, and now we can fill in a date. And so if I wanted to create a date of let's say June 1 of 2010, then I can enter the date, and you can see how it forces or enforces the date structure. Going back to our custom column manager, when we chose it to be a date, okay, we can adjust the format, whether or not we want to show the century, and what separator we want to use. Okay, so if we display the century, then it displays, and we must enter the full 4 digits for the century. So March 1st, 2011 will be entered like this. But now we have a custom column where we can enter dates, and we have a lot of robust date functions that we can use in our cell formulas to use and manipulate these dates that we've entered in our custom column. Okay, so these are the things I wanted to cover today, looking at column groups, columns, and custom columns, as well as creating and manipulating those and moving them positionally within the plan sheet. So, all right, well, thank you very much.